Hey, thanks for listening to another interview that we've got today. Our guest is Mike Adams of Grain.co, an AI note taker that is so much more than an AI note taker for Zoom and conference calls. It's actually a pretty smart platform for analyzing sales team scripts. It layers in some really smart LLM analytics that's able to crawl across a bunch of different recordings and produce insights at scale. So today is a great call with Mike Adams from Grain.com. He had some really good insights into what it's like starting a company, launching it, growing it, and realizing that marketing is a facet that needs to be layered in. As a product guy, as somebody that really thinks through kind of what the customer needs and puts it out there, he shares an interesting journey for what it's like to go through the phases of iteration, to launch a product that is new and shiny and then has updates that are new and shiny, and how long that lasts before you have to also think through some other demand generation options. Also share some really good insights into just some things he would change about launch from the beginning in considering your ICP, considering what your customers are looking for and what will make for a product that really lasts, that really has some longevity as you tailor build out parts of a product or a service or software for your customer. It really then turns into something that can have a sticky factor that goes beyond just kind of the shiny new product launches. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for joining the call today. To kick things off, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background, kind of where you came from, how you came to become, is it the founder, and you were initially the CEO at Grain, right? Tell me a little bit about what that looked like at the beginning.
Yeah, sure. So a little background on me is grew up in Utah, moved to the Bay Area in 2009 and had an econ degree and was like, what's this like tech thing? I could do this. And watched the Facebook movie and was like, if he can do it, I can do it. And I met a person who was starting a company. That company ended up, we ended up becoming co-founders. That company's still going and is, reached unicorn status many years ago. And that was kind of my intro into tech, but it really did come through education. Is like I just love teaching and instructing and helping people to understand something they didn't understand before. So the first two companies were education companies, and in my second one is an online university where we were like skip college, graduate high school, skip college, go to school on Zoom for a year, and get a job at Spotify as a data scientist. It actually worked, believe it or not. I was like in charge of my co-founder was in charge of the marketing, and he was incredible at it. One of the best PR related people. Like our first cohort was on the Today Show. Like it was crazy. Whoa. And I always took that for granted as a non-marketer for sure. I was like, oh yeah, the hard stuff is the product and the curriculum and the instructional design and the technology that's powering it all. They're both hard is what it comes down to. So, but we sold to WeWork in 2018. Things were working. The goal was to try to get one of our program and it was a hybrid instructional model to where we would have students come in and do, in-person training at a WeWork. And so there was no actual campus. The rest would be virtual online. In the end, the deal ended up not being really about that. We got acquired anyway, and I was kind of free to do my next thing. And what I thought was going to be a huge opportunity was all of the conversational data that we were collecting in these lectures, admissions interviews. I recognized, because I've done some programs before, you let someone into your school and you're like, why did we do that? Or let's get more of these people. But our interview process is almost entirely qualitative over an interview conversation. And so we would record all of these meetings and then have people turn them into, we would have humans go through and evaluate against a rubric to make a determination. So yeah, the whole premise is that conversations, so much of what we do in terms of learning or selling or training, it happens over this in-person medium of conversation that's moved on to what is now mostly Zoom and these virtual platforms. And when you record them all, that's all data. Lucky for us, large language models arrived and are the perfect, thing to work with. For the first 3 years of Grain, it was all unstructured data. No one has time to go back and rewatch a whole call. So we were trying to create interfaces on top of it that made it easier to work with recording data. Now all of the transcript information is gold for understanding what happened in a meeting, being able to enrich records outside of a meeting, across meetings, contributing to a larger process, whether it's the sales process or marketing process or whatever else. And that's kind of what we're working on now, is being able to have these, assistants that jump in calls and, take the transcripts and make us smarter and faster and more efficient by not having to do all the manual stuff that we had to do before there was really an easy way of making sense of all of that data. So that's kind of the backstory.
Very nice, very nice. So then your background then kind of throughout that process was build a product and they will come, right? So talk to me about then the shift of gears into, because that works sometimes. I mean, sometimes you land, on like a talk show and great, everybody hears about it. But if it doesn't, like, how did you shift? How did you start learning about marketing, driving some demand generation? What was that like?
Yeah, for sure. So there's been these multiple phases of Grain, and like there's definitely been a bit of, if you build it, they will come wishful thinking across the history of Grain. And in particular, our focus was on like a really novel approach that like you build it, people think it's really cool and, or useful, cool and useful ideally, and then it starts to kind of spread. And to a certain extent, that's been true. To another extent, it has not been, right? And ultimately, especially if you're in the venture-backed world, the key to success is repeatability. Repeatability is the key to scale, assuming that there's a market that wants it. And the challenge with like being overly horizontal or open or kind of like, let's see where the market takes us, is that it's almost by definition not really that scalable. And I think there's rare exceptions to that. So as over time, we've had to like increase the depth of value. Well, in order to do that, you kind of have to move from adding horizontal functionality to adding, I would say, more verticalized value. And so we've really gone deep in the last year on, I would say, deeply understanding small and medium sales teams and how to help them better serve their customer, better train their reps better, ultimately close and perform better and close more revenue and deals. And so that's been for us the last year. I actually tried to avoid that for a long time because there's an 800-pound gorilla in our space is Gong. And I'm like, man, they're huge, but they fundamentally like don't serve the mid-market, and they do serve the mid-market, but they don't serve SMB. And so there's like kind of a crossover there where there's just a huge amount of, market that's not being served. And so we looked at our user base, and despite not deliberately serving salespeople, the vast majority of the users were using it for sales calls. And so the other half was like product research or marketing research or whatever, but generally customer facing calls. And so we decided to make that kind of like the sharp edge of making sure that we are really meeting those needs. And as we do so, we still are able to help, the other use cases kind of around it, but it really does like start with sales because everything starts with the customer.
Nice. And that's something you guys can use and iterate on with your own sales team using your own product, right? So you're able to learn a lot about the product as you develop it and sell it with your sales team.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. There's like absolutely those, positive reinforcement feedback loops. And, to tie it to marketing, like what's been interesting to me as a founder is it's been about the product and product launches. You build product, you launch it, you build product, you launch it. And it works as long as you've got like a novel new thing and you're the first to market. So for example, we had built a time-stamped note taker on Zoom recordings that would allow you to like take your notes and then go back to the exact moment where you took your note. And that seems like kind of obvious now, but we were building that in 2019. And then when COVID hit in 2020, it was like, oh my gosh, like what are the tools to like make my life easier now that I'm on Zoom all day? Like I'd been living on Zoom for 5 years before that. So like kind of where we came up with these ideas, but we launched it, really positive reception, did it on Product Hunt and did a bunch of, but it's all been like product launches and it's been about the novelty of the functionality. And when you don't have an ICP and you're just like kind of putting a thing out there, it's not repeatable. And so then you're just constantly having to be on the edge of like innovation, and people quickly copied what we did and put it into their products. And now it's in probably 15 different note-taking products, but we were absolutely the first ones to do it. Yeah. And then even that has now been less important as why people even buy the product now. Like it's a total minor use case, even though that was what we like came to the market and innovated with. We raised venture capital around that momentum. And as you mature, you ultimately have to like really understand who your ICP is and what they care about, what language they use. And I wish we would have done that sooner.
I was going to say that was one of my questions I wanted to ask was if there was anything that you learned or that you know now that you wish you would have known at the beginning. Sounds like some of that really targeting the ICP, Were there any misconceptions you had about marketing that you've since overcome?
Certainly our product is freemium. Like freemium is a marketing, it's not a business strategy, it's a marketing channel. And so that has worked really well for us for sure. I don't think we leaned into it as much as we could have or should have. Like we have like a fixed number of recordings you get for free as opposed to like a monthly allocation. And so we actually have faux freemium instead of and I think if I could go back, I would have done full freemium. Our cost, isn't that high on providing it. And I think ultimately people are adopting tools and they want to be able to have confidence that they can use it recurringly without necessarily running out of an allocation and then being forced to switch over. And so that's definitely like one strategy that is a marketing, but it's super overlapped with product, of course. And then I would say the other one has been around like, it's really about product marketing. Like I hired a VP of growth 3 years ago and ultimately like made a huge mistake by letting the person go when it turns out they were actually really good at the thing I needed them to be good at, which was product marketing, to be able to take what we did and put it into the market and help people understand it. But they weren't doing all the other like growth related, growth hacks, is really big 3 years ago. In a growth at all costs culture, but I don't think that's as big of a thing now. And I had to learn that hard way of like, man, I wish I would have had that person there the whole time, and you never know how things really worked out. But I certainly made a decision to move on, probably a belief that it's all about this like activity and just doing all the growth hacks. But I feel like the core of what I've learned is like, who's your customer? Does your product really deliver it to them? And how are you differentiated? Like, what's that message that helps them to just identify and say, you guys, I want to work with you all. And if you're just pushing innovation into the market all the time, then you don't really need to do that as much because it's just about the cool novel thing. But that like wears off, and you ultimately need to have like a repeatable message through repeatable channels to, a similar group of people. And that's the key to scale. Yeah. So I would say I wish I would have probably like, it's not that we don't want to keep doing product launches, but you make those product launches increasingly more ICP focused, and you're distributing those product launches into channels where your customers, where their use case is relevant.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So less of a shiny and new kind of product launch cycle and more of like satisfying the users that you have or want to have because your ICP is so tight, these are the features they want. This is what's going to make the tool better. This is what's going to make their life better. It's like a long play, like a longevity game for the tool. Then it becomes really strong.
You have to have that deep understanding of who you're building for, because otherwise, like everything else is off. And if you just build something that's cool and see what flocks to it, there's so much noise amongst what little signal there is. Whereas if you have a really clear and deliberate strategy, hypothesis, like, it's a hard enough process itself. You can, I would say, make more sense of that noise. And so if I were to go back, I will start another company after this at some point. And any new company that I would start, I would be like, I would say super focused on a very, very, very clear ICP. Everybody told me that. I didn't listen to it enough. I just was like, oh, look at this cool thing we can do. And venture capitalists for, giving us money for the cool thing that we were doing. And it was unique and novel and frankly, quite ahead of where the market was. And we were right about where it was going. But like, I would absolutely do that. And then the other is, I think it's related, but like freemium, especially like horizontal and freemium, is a really brutal combo because you're making progress, you're adding value, but it's all happening like outside of your purview and your understanding. So then you're kind of like stuck in the product analytics, and the what is there in the product analytics, but a lot of times the why isn't. And so then you have to like add on like research and interviews, but then it's kind of, there's a lot of noise mixed in with that signal. And if I could go back, I would, or if for my next company, I will absolutely won't sell anything below a certain average contract value. I won't build a product that can't be sold above, I don't know, say at least 5 figures. And then I would sell it directly myself, build a direct sales force, in particular content engine that's bringing inbound for what we're doing. And then maybe I would add like a freemium offering, like a stripped down version of the product that can kind of drive word of mouth. But it would be on a much stronger foundation that is really hard to build when you just put something in the market and like 5,000 people to start using it for 5,000 different.
So what tools do you guys use, or is it just Grain? Maybe it's just Grain, but what tools do you guys use to gather kind of customer insights as you're iterating, as you're building it out? Is it just Grain, or are you guys using some other like software and stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, we use Amplitude for all the quantitative stuff, and then we use Brig for like, I would say, survey-based qualitative. And then we use Grain plus Zoom for interviews. I'm actually kicking off a research project this week using Grain around kind of a new strategic direction we're trying to go on. And so on the Grain bit with that, what we do, and I'm trying to make easier in the product is I'll have an interview guy. I'll go talk to 10 people and ask those questions. And then I'll create a Grain template that will use AI to pull out the relevant parts of the information of the meeting that relate to the question that was asked. And so it like completely not only takes my notes for me, but organizes them person by person, question that was being asked. And it's freaking insane. It's really, really cool. I have to like use a combination of Grain and a spreadsheet to do it, but I'll like take all those summary responses from Grain and then, have ChatGPT take a summary of the summaries. And it's like, okay, for this question, here's the summarized outcome of more or less across the 10 people. And it's like, it's a superpower. It's incredible. In fact, I get like excited going into interview projects because it saves me so much time, and not to mention it's a little less biased too, because it's like I'm remembering certain things, whereas like the LLM processes all of the information at the same time, and it's just kind of surfacing the patterns ultimately that are surfaced that are I would say the most prevalent, and not just what's attached in my brain.
Well, yeah, the idea of 10 interviews to like go process some sort of information or insight traditionally, like we'll send shudders down anybody's spine.
Like trying to pull out any sort of patterns and themes. It's not really a human task. It's great for large language models, though. It
would take a human dozens of hours, and then even then, you would probably miss some of the insights that overlapped. Dang, that's really cool.
Yeah, but I assume like kind of customer feedback based, like forms data it's the same idea, right? It's all text based. It's all structured. You can kind of do a summary of the answers in a way that is really helpful to understand the reality underneath the situation. But yeah, good stuff.
Cool. Well, that's really smart. Well, I'll close really quick with our rapid fire round of questions. Just kind of shoot from the hip or with your first answer. But what's one marketing tool you can't live without?
I mean, we use HubSpot.
Besides Grain.
Yeah, we use HubSpot for everything. So like I would probably say Webflow. Like I remember here's a story with this one is my previous company, we used a really fancy branding agency and they built us a really beautiful website in React. And it was like the worst because we couldn't update it, we couldn't change it, we couldn't do anything with it. And so then when I started Grain, I was like, we are not doing that. And so we were going to use Webflow. And we've been on Webflow for 5 years, and it's just the best because I never have to allocate any engineering resources whatsoever. Because we couldn't iterate on the messaging, we couldn't change a bunch of stuff on the website because it gets stuck behind we didn't have a very big engineering team. Putting that power into the hands of I would say marketers was really powerful, and we have no desire to move off of it or do something else. Although AI generating website stuff seems pretty cool, but I'm sure Webflow's working on that too. So.
Probably it'll be out soon. You're the third or fourth person that's told me Webflow is their go-to, and I've even played inside of there before. But it's interesting to hear people stick with it for years. What's the biggest marketing mistake you've made? I think you already actually kind of touched on this. What did you learn from it about that product person, right? Product marketer.
Yeah, I would say like if you're building a product first business, nail product marketing. It's a different type of marketing than the others. Like if you have a clearly established ICP and a clearly established product and a clearly established market, like I would say product marketing is still very important for that. That's because you got to differentiate it and do it well. But like definitely, I guess the sum of my like marketing learning is novelty can only get you so far, right? You've got to like have first principled understanding and then build playbooks and processes and systems around it, as opposed to like put something novel out there and hope it's Figma,
Right on. Okay, last question. What's a surprising story or fun fact about you your team hasn't heard till right now? You can feel free to plead the fifth, always an option, but what would be shocking to your team to hear?
I mean, the early days of Grain, I don't know, this is one that I was looking for a name for the company and I couldn't think of anything. And I remember there was a Black Mirror episode about like the entire history review, you could like play back. And I was like, man, there's something there. Listening to I watched the whole episode, and the product itself in that Black Mirror episode is called Harvest Grain. And I thought the harvest part was creepy, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's pretty cool. And then, bought several, like used grain.com, and then we ended up buying grain.com, and it's been a great name. We love it. And it means so much more than, some Black Mirror episode, but that's actually where it came from. So I was just like trying to come up with some sort of idea, and I was like, "What's that thing?" It was kind of like where you record all of your stuff, and it ends up kind of having a dystopian storyline in the episode, but it ended up having a pretty good like product name. I think the writers of the show had been really thoughtful around like a good name for that product.
Nice. Origin story. There you have it. Everybody's heard it. Well, cool. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Definitely some good insights, and I'm sure we'll catch up later.
Please, let's do. And I got a 3:30, so I got to jump, but let's absolutely catch up. Keep me posted.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Bye.